with MMA, I kind of think that like MMA as a sport is the most atomized, the most like lonely, individualistic professional pursuit. And you see this in like how efforts to like have a fighters union or to even get things like a pension. And like, can you think of any professional sport that's more in need of a pension program and one that's farther away from having one? It,
Do you want to talk about how heartbreaking those? I don't know if you got to see a lot of those declarations that have been posted since
Oh
the.
yeah,
Oh my!
Shane Carwin's.
Oh my God!
Those were fucking like for people who don't know. Shane Carwin was former UFC interim heavyweight champion. He contested for the unified title against Brock Lesnar. He was a really exciting heavyweight fighter, gigantic guy, massive punching power. He never got knocked out in his professional career, but all it takes is one bad fight or like a few bad years of training. And Shane Carwin used to pride himself about how he worked full time as an engineer outside of MMA because he had a really like good story. He had sole custody of his daughter. He was a single dad, and he said he wanted to have something to fall back on in case fighting didn't work out, which was a very smart thing. And Carwin, a guy who didn't have that many fights, and like most of them ended with him knocking out his opponent very quickly. He can no longer work as an engineer due to brain trauma. And I just think like in general, everyone in the sport is just there's just so much like characteristically American individualism
Mm-hmm.
where someone is going to go, I'm going to like get into a collective bargaining effort with a guy I may fight for the title. We're going to be on the same side. Fuck that. It's the same thing that prevents people who like at a time when there is just greatly diminished social mobility in America, people who their economic beliefs are informed by the idea that they just know they're going to be rich someday. And when
Mm-hmm.
that happens, they don't want to pay a higher marginal tax rate. It's the same thing with MMA. Athletes need a certain level of delusion to perform. Like, I totally understand that. There's no point in competing in the UFC if you don't believe that you could be champion, obviously. But the odds are so low. But because all these guys do believe that, they're at least going to be making like Conor McGregor money someday, they don't want to like upset the apple cart, or it's just way too individualistic. It's
Mm-hmm.
way too atomized. Friendships in the sport really don't seem to last that long. Like the Jorge Masvidal and Cody Covington relationship is a good example of that. But it just, I don't know. I think it is probably always going to be like that, unfortunately, which really sucks because regardless of these guys' political beliefs, they're still fucking human beings. And the
Mm-hmm.
idea of them not being able to like provide for their kids or like live in dignity when this is all said and done is horrifying. It's really fucking sad.
I really like that you compared this in many ways to what we're basically seeing is the UFC and the US have the same understanding of this American dream, right? You're coming to the US to achieve what you couldn't in your home country, or you're just expecting that one day you're going to make it big. This is what's been promised, right? Your generations have told you this. And the UFC is the same thing. We have the propaganda that you're not going to make it big unless you're in the UFC. You're not going to succeed as an MMA fighter unless you're in the UFC, unless you make it big and you fight in the UFC. So you're willing, with that mentality, you're willing to accept any sort of exploitation until you get there. And you won't ever you will believe firmly in the concept of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, which is a fantasy. It's not real. And I'm not saying that people can't work hard and achieve things. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm saying there is positions of privilege and things that have happened to you throughout your life that helped you get to where you are, to not recognize that some of that comes from your education, some of that comes from the help of your parents. There are social nets and welfare that we absolutely need around us to help us succeed. That's not saying that we're not pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps. That's not saying we're not working hard. But this idea that you can only do it individually, this rugged, disturbing honestly destructive form of individualism that's seen in the United States now is just so harmful. And a microcosm of that exists in the UFC, to the fact that, as you said, UFC fighters are more than willing to sacrifice the greater good, the idea that they can actually achieve pensions and some sort of financial stability on the off chance that that one fighter can emerge above the fray and actually make it big and become the next Conor McGregor. Are you kidding me? It's just
Yeah.
so tragic to witness.
Yeah. The company makes so much money, and they have made so much money off of these guys. I think, again, you would need someone who's actually has training in statistics and mathematics and economics like John Nash, and not an idiot like me to figure this out. But I think the UFC has the greatest ratio of like value extracted from fighters compared to value returned to fighters. Like these are probably the single most exploited professional athletes at a high level, and they are just, I followed stuff like Nathan Quarry's effort to start a
Mhm.
fighters organization. I know Randy Couture was involved in that, and I got pretty optimistic because Randy is like not just a respected former competitor, but Extreme Couture still coaches a lot of pretty high level guys, and a lot of people respect him in the sport. And he's also a lifelong Republican, so I don't think people will see him as like a libtard. But like, if I had to bet on this, I would not bet on the, economic well-being of fighters or there being any type of safety net in the near future. And it's just, it really fucking sucks. And you can't, you try to tell people till you're blue in the face that they're being fucked over, and everyone is just too polarized to accept that.